I guess it's the divine that saves the world, let's say. You could say that by definition. And then you might say, well, are there pointers to that which will save the world, or that which eternally saves the world? And the answer to that, in all likelihood, is yes. And that's maybe truth and love and justice and the classical virtues, beauty, perhaps in some sense foremost among them. That's a difficult case to make, but definitely a pointer.
Which direction is the arrow pointing?
Well, the arrow is pointing up. And no, I think that which it points to is what beauty points to. It transcends beauty. It's more than beauty.
And that speaks to the divine.
It points to the divine. Yeah, and I would say again, by definition, because we could define the divine in some real sense. So one way of defining the divine is, what is divine to you is your most fundamental axiom. And you might say, well, I don't have a fundamental axiom. Then I would say, that's fine, but then you're just confused because you have a bunch of contradictory axioms. And you might say, well, I have no axioms at all. And then I'd say, well, you're just epistemologically ignorant beyond comprehension if you think that, because that's just not true at all.
So you don't think a human being can exist within contradictions?
Well, yeah, we have to exist within contradiction, but when the contradictions make themselves manifest, say in confusion with regard to direction, then the consequence of that technically is anxiety and frustration and disappointment and all sorts of other negative emotions. But the cardinal negative emotion signifying multiple pathways forward is anxiety. It's an entropy signal. Well, I would say it probably doesn't have to be, it can't be reduced to clarity and simplicity, because when it's optimally structured, it's a balance between order and chaos, not order itself. If it's too ordered, if music is too ordered, it's not acceptable. It sounds like a drum machine. It's too repetitive. It's too predictable. It has to have, well, it has to have some fire in it, yes, along with the structure. I was in Miami doing a seminar on Exodus with a number of scholars, and this is a beauty discussion. When Moses first encounters the burning bush, it's not a conflagration that demands attention. It's something that catches his attention. It's a phenomena, and that means to shine forth. And Moses has to stop and attend to it, and he does. And he sees this fire that doesn't consume the tree. And the tree is a structure, right? It's a tree-like structure. It's a branching structure. It's a hierarchical structure. It's a self-similar structure. It's a fractal structure. And it's the tree of life, and it's the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And the fire in it is the transformation that's always occurring within every structure. And the fact that the fire doesn't consume the bush in that representation is an indication of the balance of transformation with structure. And that balance is presented as God. And what attracts Moses to it, in some sense, is the beauty. Now, it's the novelty and all that, but like a painting is like a burning bush. That's a good way of thinking about it, a great painting. It's too much for people often. You know, my house was, and will soon be again, completely covered with paintings inside. And it was hard on people to come in there because, well, my mother, for example, would say, well, why would you want to live in a museum? And I'd think, well, I would rather live in a museum than anywhere else in some real sense. But beauty is daunting. It scares people. They're terrified of buying art, for example, because their taste is on display. And they should be terrified because generally people have terrible taste. Now, that doesn't mean they shouldn't foster it and develop it. And you know, when you put your taste on display, it's really exposes you.
Even to yourself as you walk past it.
Oh, definitely.
Every day.
Absolutely.
This is who I am.
Yeah, well, and look how mundane that is, and look how trite it is, and look at how cliched it is, and look at how sterile or too ordered it is, or too chaotic.
Or how quickly you start to take it for granted because you've seen it so many times.
Well, if it's a real piece of art, that doesn't happen.
You notice the little details.
The whole is greater than the sum of the parts. I mean, there are images, religious images in particular, so we could call them deep images, that people have been unpacking for 4,000 years. Be a little stronger, dress a little better, speak a little more clearly, aim a little higher, and practice that, and that'll work. Now, I know that that's more difficult for some people than others, because some people bear incredibly difficult developmental burdens, you know. And I'm not saying that this is easy, but I'm saying that it's a useful reaction. Like, what else are you going to do? What else are you going to do? Complain about women? You know, I've seen that in men. I went out with a group of men who were having trouble with their wives, and they'd gone off to this like couples retreat, and it was mostly rubbish, although they were trying a bit to get their lives together. And I spent a whole day with them. There were 3 of them, and one of them was a guy that I'd known for quite a while, and every single word he said was a lie. And all these 3 did the whole day was complain about their wives. And I thought, what the hell's wrong with you guys? Like, you picked them. They're these women you picked, you know, and maybe they have their flaws, but they're your wives. And that's how you talk about them? And you think they're the problem? You're so dumb that you don't even know that you shouldn't badmouth your wife. Just because she's your wife. Like when Tammy and I got married, we had a discussion about that. It's like, she has her flaws and I have my flaws, but I'm her husband and she's my wife. And there's a certain respect that goes along with that category, if you have any sense. And so that's an extension of the same thing. You know, it's best to look to yourself. Now and then you can, you know, things have gone rotten in society and you have to bear your responsibility. You have to address that at a social level, at a communal level. But fundamentally, it's like, and you do so much less harm if you look to yourself first as the problem. And believe me, you're plenty of problem for you. You're all the problem you need for you. That's for sure. I would say to young men who are irritated at women is, if you're irritated at women, you know, as a class of creature, there's something wrong with you, because they're right. You're wrong. They're right to not pick you. If they're not picking you, it's because they're right.
Wow.
Now, that might get, I know that's a terrible thing to say, and I know perfectly well, it wasn't like I was particularly successful with girls when I was young. You know, so I know what that rejection is like. I know what that fear is like. I don't know it as well as some men know it, because I wasn't rejected outright. But what you have to understand is that, what do you expect from women? If you got pregnant because you had sex, you'd be pretty damn choosy too. So, you know, clue in a bit. And then, well, don't they find you attractive? Well, maybe you're not. Like, have you paid attention to how you dress? Do you have a plan? Are you as educated as you could be? You know, are you a liar? Are you a rabid pornography user? Because maybe that's undermining your motivation to seek out a woman and grow yourself up. It's like, if you're rejected constantly and you're out there really trying, you know, because that's another thing to ask yourself is, well, how many women have you actually asked out? And are you so sure that you're not picking women who will certainly reject you because you're trying to bat out of your league? Because you might be. So, and I'm speaking about this as a clinician too, because I had plenty of men in my practice who were, you know, radically unsuccessful with women. I had one man in particular. He was so afraid of women, he couldn't use the phone. He was too afraid of everyone to use the phone. And he had been bullied like mad, and you know, he had his problems. So I know what this is like, but pornography is a big problem. It's a big problem. It's a real curse, that pornography, in my opinion, because it's an easy out. And so we don't know what the consequences of that are. We're starting to understand some of them. But if you were better, you'd be more successful with women. So you have to have that in your mind. And you cannot be angry at women. It's stupid. Women, it's like women being angry at men. It's a sign of psychological trouble, that.